All right, welcome back to the Pump Fake, everybody. Jarrett Bailey with you, joined now by former Buffalo Bills offensive lineman John Fina, as we are gearing up for Week 18. We're really gearing up for the wild card round, depending on what the Bills decide to do against the Patriots. We'll see how much the starters play, but we know what y'all came for. We came here for the MVP talk. John, it's good to see you, my man. How are you?
Hey, Jared, it's great to be with you, man. Appreciate you reaching out today. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, appreciate you coming on at such short notice. But with all the MVP talk from the big networks and whatnot, it feels like there's been a little bit of a pendulum swing from those folks, specifically the worldwide leader, where it seems that I don't want to word this in a way that comes off as super duper negative or anything, but it does feel like there's a little bit of a bias toward a certain quarterback in Baltimore who wears 8,
Okay.
compared to the attention and love that Josh Allen gets, and I feel like I don't know. I think a lot of it needs discussed, and especially the narratives coming into the year surrounding the Bills, where and I was like, this is going to be the Miami Dolphins or the New York Jets kind of supersede the Bills, and instead they wrapped up the AFC East 15, the earliest that any team has done in 15 years. So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of things that are just kind of put on the back burner with Josh that doesn't seem to get talked about enough.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of meat on the bone to talk about. My personal opinion is probably the same as Josh Allen and everybody that, lives and works at One Bills Drive, that the MVP is far less significant than a Super Bowl appearance and Super Bowl victory, right? I mean, you have to understand the city of Buffalo. I played in two of those Super Bowl losses, and they would trade MVP 5 years in a row for a Super Bowl win. And I think Josh feels the same way. The discussion, though, however, among talking heads, it swings both directions. And I understand the argument for either quarterback. I even understand the argument for Saquon Barkley, right? So, what do you envision the MVP? What does it mean to you as a voter, as somebody who can chime in? Is it somebody who leads the team through an expectation of a superior year? Or is it, wow, this guy took a team that was widely regarded as a third place finisher in their own division, which they've dominated for 4 previous years, and cobbled together personalities and basically a new play caller, offensive coordinator, and created this 13-3 season that we're staring the face of right now. I mean, my vote will always be for Josh Allen, only because, well, a number of reasons. But the first, when I live out in the West and I'm staying up till midnight watching games out of the Mountain West and late Pac-12 games, while you guys on the East Coast are dead asleep. You've already had your hangover, and then you're racked out at 11 o'clock at night. And I was watching Josh Allen and thinking to myself, man, a little tinkering and this guy's something special. And when the Bills drafted him, the outrage, it was monumental, but I was very happy about it. I've watched him develop. Of course, I'm very close to him. I listen to him. He's a team guy. I just believe that when it comes to the MVP conversation, for me, that Josh edges out Lamar. And I've always been a fan of Lamar all the way back to his time at Louisville. And my buddy is a huge Ravens fan. And I get it. I get it. Uh, it's just how it sits with you and what you believe MVP means. And in my opinion, Josh edges out Lamar. He edges out Saquon. And that's where I sit.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to point out that, like, yes, Lamar's fantastic. And I think for me, especially just because, like, growing up a Steelers fan, and I think a lot of the reputation that comes with that is like, oh, you just hate Lamar because you hate the Ravens. Of course I hate the Ravens. I'm a Steelers fan. Like, what are we doing here? But it is important to point out, like, Lamar's having a tremendous year. You could probably even throw
Fantastic.
you can even throw Joe Burrow in there if the Bengals make the playoffs, because I think a lot of Bills fans were making that argument last year when Josh led them down the stretch to overcome a 3-game deficit at the AFC East and did what he did last year. So I mean, if people wanted to throw Burrow in there, if the Bengals get into the playoffs, obviously Saquon's crossed the 2,000-yard threshold. So it's been an incredibly special year for special players. And when it comes down to it, though, I think the biggest thing for me has been the Bills lost their number one and number two receivers. The Ravens gained an 1,800-yard rusher. And not to take away from Lamar, but he has certainly had a lot more help in terms of the weapons department compared to what Josh Allen has had, where it's been basically a completely rebuilt wide receivers room with the exception of Khalil Shakir. The fact that you bring in guys like a Curtis Samuel, a Mac Hollins, you draft Keon Coleman. Yeah, you trade for Amari Cooper, but he hasn't Amari Cooper, since he's joined the Bills, has been, I think, more of a, just a role guy than a star guy so far, and he's missed some time with injury. So with everything factored in, plus they just, broke the record for most points in a season by the offense. So like they're having a tremendous year. And I think for all of that is why Josh would be the MVP in my mind over, a guy like Lamar or Burrow.
And Jarrett, that's the argument, right? Statistics are one thing. MVP, are you a statistic-based MVP voter? Because if that's the case, then I guess you give it to Lamar. But I do agree with you in that the MVP means more than just how few picks have you thrown, how many TDs do you have, and then if you want to throw stats at it, the most points the Bills have ever scored in a season, breaking Thurman Thomas's record and then tying Thurman Thomas's record for James Cook. So I think crafting this 13-3 season with the cast of characters that you just mentioned is really quite remarkable, because we didn't, like you said, bring in an 1,800-yard rusher.
Right.
So again, if it comes down to MVP vote and it's Lamar or it's Burrow or it's Saquon and it is not my guy, like, you can come to my house. I won't be burning down houses. I won't be flipping over cars, because my goal is that game in February, right? That's the goal for my beloved Buffalo Bills. And I stand by that. And I think Josh, in the end, 40 years from now, if he had 7 MVPs and no Super Bowl appearances or Lombardi trophies, would say, I'll trade them all to be with my guys, my team, my staff, my admin, my security team, my freaking, guys that wash my clothes, right? Those guys, and hoist that trophy up, because that is a memorable thing to do and it will outlast your lifetime. But I can't remember who the MVP was 3 years ago. And if I go back and look it up, I'm going to be less interested in that than who won the actual Super Bowl.
That's a good point. And even Josh talked about it yesterday after the game, because Tracy Wolfson had asked him about, all the MVP things. I don't care about that. Like it's more so about playing in February. And look, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to these quarterbacks, that's what they're going to be judged on more so than how many MVPs they won, whether it's Lamar or Allen or Burrow. Like,
and Jarrett, you brought up, not to interrupt, but you brought up that interview where he said, look, I don't care about that. Mm-hmm. And on the face of it, 50% of people would say, I believe him. 50% might say, well, I don't. But if you go back and look through the games where he's had options to make it about himself, force a bad throw, or to pull and keep, or, force a ball into an incomplete situation because, he doesn't, because he thinks it'll pad my stats if it's completed. And this year he's made more seasoned quarterback decisions by just chucking that ball 16 yards out of bounds over the receiver's head, because he feels like, I put my team at risk for success in winning this game if I try to force this ball into, a guy that's got 2 guys hanging off of him, which he has done in the past. But his growth and his unselfishness and the way this offense is being run, it reflects his comments accurately. You'll catch my podcast later, I'm sure, the Off Tackle Show with John Fina, where I break down 5 or 6 plays and talk about, success by the Jets, success by the Bills. And as I consume the film, I see these types of things where he's not making it all about himself, where there is a balanced approach, where we had more runs in the game yesterday than I think we've had all season. And his desire to win the game rather than promote himself by statistical outcome or what have you has all made it happen anyway, just naturally.
And I think we saw kind of an extension of that when Joe Brady took over as the offensive coordinator last year in the game against Dallas, where they ran for like 270 yards. Josh only threw the ball 15 times. And I mean, they won by, I think they were up like 30-3 late in the game. The Cowboys got a garbage time touchdown. I think that was kind of the beginning of this whole new kind of style of Bills football. We're seeing James Cook emerge as a really big player in that as well. Compare this Bills offense, by the way, to some of the ones that you played in, because again, we didn't expect the Bills to be this great offensively with a complete new cast of characters almost. All the numbers say that this is the most proficient or efficient offense in team history, but I mean, you played with some great ones as well.
Well, I'll tell you, the beauty of this game and why I love football over any other sport, aside from the obvious reasons, is because of the evolution of the game. You can compare, hockey's got a rink, and that's pretty much it. I mean, they don't have a ton of, and some hockey guy is going to kill me for this, but
some guy in Hartford's going to be listening to this and be like,
actually, they don't huddle up and run a play and think about as much, I imagine. And not to take anything away from hockey players, I can't even imagine how they do what they do. The NBA is restricted by the court and individual performances. Usually baseball doesn't really compare, right, with a pitched ball and the requirement to hit the ball. But we had a lot of balance when I played between the run and the pass, between Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, all the guys that made up those great teams. But what I love now is how, and everybody does it, and it's a copycat league, but how the offense is opened up, and it's reflecting more of the college football game now, which just makes it more dynamic, more interesting. But why have the Bills had success? And I think it's Joe Brady's willingness to go out and say, I see what the Chiefs are doing. I see what San Francisco is doing. I see what Detroit is doing. And I want to do it. Do I have the personnel for it? And that's the first answer. Do I have the personnel? Yes, I have the personnel. Let's adopt some of these things. Let's explode the space between the tackles and figure out how to run better between them. And then let's use our wide receiver set to create opportunities for James Cook to get on the edge. And let's improve our bubble screen game. Let's improve our screen game, which has been awful for 3 or 4 years now. And I think it's that I have to imagine, and in my dreams, this is what I see: Josh and Joe Brady and whomever else is important to this conversation sitting down and saying, how can we evolve? How can we make this game fun? How can we make it successful? And how can we keep the defense scratching their head? And I think that is really where it separates, because this team is good balance of run and pass. We were good balance of run and pass in the 1920s, but it's just so much more exciting to watch football now.
Break down for me the team with the hardest matchup that you think for Buffalo. It feels like they're kind of on a collision course with Kansas City, but personally, I think that Baltimore would be more of a difficult matchup just because of the run game that they possess, and we saw what it did to them earlier in the year. The Bills' defense has been under a little bit of fire over the last month or so with the consecutive performances against the Rams and the Lions. Obviously, earlier in the year against Baltimore, where they gave a bunch of rushing yards. Is there a team going into the playoffs that you say that team could give them more trouble than others?
Yeah, well, I haven't looked. Is it set? Do we have 5, 6, and 7 in the AFC yet, or was it just
so? The Chargers, Steelers have 2 wild cards locked up, and then it's going to come down to the Broncos, Bengals, and Dolphins for that final spot, depending on how things happen. Yeah,
right. So I think initially my first concern is the defense of the Broncos, if that's who we face first, right? Beyond that, I just, the Baltimore Ravens, the coach Harbaugh is just such a fantastic coach.
Sure.
We have struggled with the running game, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We have seen over the past 3 or 4 weeks here where we've been running a little bit more 4-3 rather than 4-2, which is uncharacteristic of Bobby Babich and Brandon Beane's defenses. So we're getting our sea legs, so to speak. We're getting our timing up and responsibilities in order to defend the run on 1st and 10, on 2nd and medium, and things of that nature if we decide to go to a 4-3. So healthy personnel at the linebacker position is the second caveat that I will add to that. We've had some rotational injury issues. Guys seem to be, knock on wood, on a healthy trajectory. But I would say Baltimore's running attack And then obviously, I mean, Lamar's legs, same thing when people look at Buffalo, like how are we going to protect against this guy when he gets outside of the pocket? And then of course, that's the biggest hurdle. I like our matchup against the Chiefs a little bit better, but we have to probably beat somebody to get there, right? Well, we certainly have to beat somebody. Yeah. And Baltimore would probably be my least favorite team to face in order to make our way to that Super Bowl game.
Do you think that there's any sort of pressure on McDermott after the season if they don't get the job done this year?
I hit this a lot. I guess my answer to that would be a question to you. I mean,
sure.
If you're a basement dweller, you're definitely looking at replacing your coach. As a former player, for me, I would say hell no. Just the resources that you have to cobble together to put the right staff together to take advantage of, Josh's prime and where we are at the moment. I don't consider losing in the playoffs as a failure, right? People ask me about Tomlin all the time. I'm like, okay, I think he has one Super Bowl win.
Yeah.
Well, he hasn't, he gets to the playoffs every damn year. And I'm like, that's great. If you know how hard it is to win a football game and let alone win 13 or 11 or 10, and you make it to the playoffs year in and year out, you're at the top of your division, you're a competitor, a call here and there or a mistake here and there happens. And if you're on the losing end of that and you're out a little earlier than you want to be, I just think you got to be careful about looking a gift horse in the mouth and sending them to the glue factory. I think you have to take a step back and remember that we had 17 years of drought. If you're a Miami Dolphins fan, you'd be begging to have the Bills right now. Cleveland, I mean, look at the Patriots. They had a dynasty. Now my Patriots fans' friends they don't even watch the games anymore. I mean, come on, fellas. This is a good time to be a Bills fan. I'm a fan of McDermott. I love what they put together. He's done a great job with the roster, but I lost 2 Super Bowls. They lost 2 before I got there. I still think those teams in the 90s were fantastic, and Marv didn't deserve to be fired, and he wasn't. And I think it's a smart play to keep them on.
Well, let me rephrase it to you like this, because I never played. I'm not going to pretend that I did. So you obviously look at this from a different lens, but you brought up Mike Tomlin. I think that's a perfect comp, actually. Obviously those two are very good friends, but I think they also face some of similar issues, at least Tomlin more particularly, when it comes to with Tomlin and, to a degree McDermott, but with Tomlin, it's, you're going to get 9-10 wins, but that certainly felt like the ceiling over the past few years. With McDermott, I think the thing with Bills fans is like, you got to take advantage of Josh's prime when he's there. And if you could, maybe bring in, Ben Johnson's kind of the hot name right now. I think a lot of Bills fans would look at that after this year and say, okay, well, if we can bring in maybe a little bit more of an offensive minded guy like a Ben Johnson, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So I think that that's more of what the lens that I look at it from. Not to say that I think that Sean McDermott should be fired, but in terms of the playoff shortcomings, I think a lot of it comes down to decision-making in crucial moments rather than just him being a bad coach. He's obviously not a bad coach. But I think that's more of the lens that I look at it from personally. But again, I defer to you when it comes to that type of stuff, because I am very intrigued where a player would look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I guess it's all well and good when we're talking about people's lives and, their jobs. And, you get this to draw kind of a crude corollary. It's like we're supposed to feel bad for every government worker that might lose their job because we need government to be more efficient and streamlined and budget conscious, right? And we're supposed to weep for, a bureaucrat that loses their job, but we're going to go chop off Mike Tomlin's head for, going to the playoffs every year. And I'm like, we're not feeding the world or curing cancer here. We're just putting a product on the field that, all Pennsylvanians who root for the Steelers can be super proud of. And it's not like I just create my game plan, on all this paper. And I'm like, okay, I got my game plan. I'm just going to put it there and beat your game plan because mine's 88 pages and yours is 81. There are mistakes that are made. There are mistakes that are made on the field, and coaching mistakes happen. I just can't get behind, those types of things because there's execution issues that happen. You might say it's a bad coaching decision, but I think when you reference the ones that the Bills suffered and lost is because player error on the field. You might say, well, I put you in the wrong situation. And then a lot of times it's not the head coach. You got the DC who decided to dial up that defense for that particular play, or the special teams coach, which we had a huge gaffe last year in the Denver game, right? And I just can't get behind that. The lives of men depend on it. I was cut, family lives, family income. So until it's all even across the board, I'm not gonna advocate for firing successful people.
And he certainly has been successful. And hopefully this is the year that the Bills get over the top and bring a Lombardi back to One Bills Drive. I'm sure that you would love that. The fans of Buffalo, the people of Buffalo, are yearning for a parade, and it would certainly be one to look forward to. John Fina, what's coming on Off Tackle this week?
Oh, hey, I'm glad you asked, Jarrett, because I started doing this thing, which I almost regret, where I pick about 5 or 6 plays and I videotape them on my computer screen and I break them down. So if you want to learn a little bit about football, go to @John Fina on Twitter, find the Overreaction Buffalo podcast on YouTube, and I'll break down plays. And it doesn't matter if it's your team or not your team. You want to learn a little bit about football, a little bit of offensive line play. I'll give you my insights, tell you why a play was successful, why they struggled, or just something that was really cool. And on today's lineup this evening, I'm doing a bubble screen, and it's not an exciting play. I'm doing the safety by Epinesa, and that's got some pretty cool stuff in it in the background. And then boring things like how James Cook crosses the formation to pick up a blitzer on a play that had just advanced the ball. It's just really cool X's and O's stuff. There's a lot of it on Twitter, but mine's the best, if I do say so myself. So come to the Overreaction Buffalo on YouTube, Off Tackle Show. We got a great network going. We're having a lot of fun, powered by Believe. And dude, I'm having the best time right now. I lived through the drought. My team's in the playoffs. We're winning the division. And I just have so much fun with it. I love my Bills Mafia people, the chicken wings, the blue cheese. I mean, it is just, it's killing it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And you can go listen to that show, the very same place you can find this show, on Believe. If you're watching this on YouTube, though, be sure to give it a subscribe. If you're listening to it as a podcast, give it a review as we head into the new year. John Fina, my friend, I sincerely appreciate you for joining me, and hopefully we can be talking again after a Bills playoff win here in a couple weeks.
Jarrett, I am at your disposal. It's going to be a blast. And for everybody listening, go check out Pinto Ron. He hit his 500th game. He's the guy that gets covered in mustard and ketchup at every game. And I got to squirt ketchup and mustard on him once. It is hilarious. I love the personalities of the NFL. You're a great personality, and you have a great show. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate that, my friend. And we will be back later on in the week to preview Week 18 and get you all set for Wild Card Weekend right here on the Pump Fake. Talk soon.